Well, welcome back to Breaking the Silence. And tonight we have Dr. Irena Scott with us, which we're really very blessed to have. We had Philip Mantle, and now we have Irena. And if you haven't got this book, this is the hardback. Philip sent me this. I mean, I thought he was just going to send me a softback, he sends me this huge book. But I highly recommend you get it in the hardback. I try to get all my books that way because the detail in it is just astounding. They thoroughly researched this case, unlike any two people I've ever known. And it's probably one of the best cases in the history of this field. Which brings me to this before I bring Irena on. That is, there's a certain channel on YouTube, very popular, millions and millions of subscribers and viewers. And with what comes with that is a responsibility. And when the host, and many of you will know who I'm talking about, who does review this subject matter and does tell the whole story rather accurately and set you up to feel that this is a legitimate case, only in the end to completely debunk it. And in the case of this one individual, he said that these two very brave men with the Pascagoula case were basically lying. He basically said that they had been drinking. And I'll underline what he said, a lot of drinking. And that's just wrong. Let's bring on Irena and see what she has to say about that. Hi, Irena.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I don't know if you heard what I was talking about, but I can be very ornery when it comes to this subject, and people that I just removed a comment from our channel just a minute ago about Susan Alloway's case, which was a very extensive documentary with her that we shot and filmed about her experience back in 1978 crossing the desert and being stopped in the road by a bunch of jackrabbits, only to have them turn out to be beings and non-human intelligence. And this gentleman said that basically the rabbits do that because it's cold and the roads are warm and you were basically drinking. And it was a coincidence. But I have no tolerance with that. I immediately removed the person from the channel. In fact, he can't even see it anymore. So did you know about the debunking that was done on this case on YouTube by one of the largest channels on YouTube?
I know it's been debunked. I didn't know specifically what one you're talking about, though.
Yeah, I'm not saying names for obvious reasons because,
okay,
people are very sue happy these days, and really I should be able to do that, but I'm just being careful. So
yeah, there's been some debunking write-ups about it and everything, but out of all the debunking, I don't know which one you're talking about, so I'll have to ask you later.
Yeah, well, this person suggested that mostly that the people that claim these experiences, we're at home today. Excuse me. No, but come here. Come here. I want you to go in here. Go ahead. I thought you were going to put it in the bathroom.
Okay.
We're at home today because we just got a new camera, new studio quality camera for our, and of course it had to come right now. It's had all day to be here. It shows up now. So please forgive me. Anyway, this person basically said that the people that had these experiences, myself included, we all have serious issues, serious problems. We need to face up to it. We need help. And he said that about this case, and he said that they had both been drinking a great deal. Now, I don't know where he got that information from because I couldn't find it myself.
Yeah, I don't think one of them even drank. So, and the other, neither of them had drank anything when that happened.
Yeah.
That I know.
Yeah. And even if they had a couple of beers or something, I don't know how people stretch things so far as to imagine that, well, you had some whiskey, so of course you saw aliens. I mean, huh? But I think that's basically an intelligence test.
Well, lots of people drink, but not everybody sees an alien when they drink.
No, but for someone to think that you could see aliens just because you drank too much, to me, shows lower intelligence.
Yeah, logic, you might
lacking
say.
in critical thinking and intellectual capacity to an extreme. Anyway, you can tell I'm bothered by it. So let's talk about your work and let's talk about the book and how did you, what interests me, because we had Philip on, and we really didn't talk about how you two got together and worked on this project. And that's fascinating to me as to how you got involved and what your major contributions were. I know you did a lot of field work. You've had an impressive background as a field investigator, and you've worked in astronomy and all kinds of fields. So I was curious how you came up, what got your interest in this, what got you and Philip to team up and work together on the book?
Well, I was kind of a part of it. I started out a long time ago, actually the same time as the Pascagoula abduction happened. And that was because I was living in Missouri and my parents were living in Ohio. And one night my mother called and said, "Did you hear this sound?" And I said, "No." And then, I told her I thought she was off. And so I said, she doesn't drink though. We're 600 miles away. And she was a real logical person, but she still kept asking me if I heard that sound. And then several days later, she called, and she's a real skeptical person too. And she said they were having a huge UFO wave in Ohio, and people were seeing them and hiding in their basement and keeping their kids at home and everything else. It sounded like a war zone. And I didn't think about it for years. And then I moved to Ohio, and I was working at Ohio State University. And just one day, for something to do, I was in the library and they had newspapers, and I went in and thought I'd look for when that happened. There was a sound, and then there was a big wave, and that's all I knew about it. And I just guessed that the date was around the middle of October in '73. And so I went in, there were all these papers all over. And I thought I'd never find it. But I looked just in a couple papers, and I found a little article about this sound. And it was very intriguing because there was no reason to account for it. But it was heard for a huge area across the country and no explanation for it. And I got interested. I also read about there was an abduction then, and I had no interest in that at all. Just like the person said they were drunk or something. And so anyway, I did research on it, and I submitted to a scientific journal. I didn't know anything about the UFO literature anyway. And the seismologist of Ohio took it up and helped me do research on it, and I published it in a scientific journal. Something about the sound, that it was explaining everything. So that's how I started on Pascagoula. And then later I published something in the MUFON journal, and I got debunked. And the person said, "Oh, this is an airplane," and I debunked the debunker and everything. And so anyway, then years later, I heard about Philip Mantle's press, and I submitted a book proposal, and he accepted. And then he got really interested in Pascagoula. And so I already had an interest because I'd done some research on the sound that happened the same time as the abduction, so far as I can tell. And so he's in England, and he has this English accent. And down in Mississippi, they have an accent. My husband's down there, and he used to, we'd go down there, and he'd have to translate what they were saying to me. And so Philip wanted somebody in the United States to talk to them. And so he asked me to do it. And I already had an interest in the whole thing on account of that's how I started out. And so that's how I wound up doing research and interviewing people and all that with him.
And Philip's a very, very, he takes this stuff very seriously, and he's very skeptical himself. And so it seems to me that he really weeds through the evidence and really analyzes it and comes to conclusions based on more of a scientific methodology than just, going by the folklore. He really seems to get in there and take the whole thing apart, put it back together again. Because I've talked to him about other cases where he's just said, "Oh, that was all, just crazy stuff. That was not a legitimate case." And not all UFO investigators, as you know, are that way. Some of them are they're easygoing. And I didn't find Philip to be that. So that also brings a lot of credibility to both the research that you both did on this case.
Well, he was very particular that I interview everybody in detail and kind of get to know them too, besides just interviewing them, and ask a lot of questions and things.
Well, so you met with both Calvin Parker and Charlie Hicks?
No, Calvin he was ill, and I had talked to him some. Charlie had died by that time.
Right. So you actually got involved in this case much later on.
I was just involved with the sound up until then, not the abduction.
What did that sound like? Can you describe it?
Well, it was often referred to as a sonic boom, but the scientists that studied it, at first they explained it as an airplane, and then they realized it was way larger than the sonic carpet of a sonic boom of an airplane. And so finally they explained it as a earth-grazing meteor, but I found 2 seismographs that picked it up, and I could calculate the speed, and it was way below the speed of a earth-grazing meteor. And so it was just pretty much unexplained. But it happened about the same time as the abduction, and there were just a huge wave of UFO sightings at that time.
Kind of like we're having today. What do you think about that right now? I mean, there's been a lot of, the mainstream media has highlighted a lot of videos that are so easily explained away. Even ABC didn't have the knowledge to know that their camera was out of focus and centered on Venus, and they thought that was a drone, or a UFO. So predominantly what the media has been showing us are aircraft of our own. But there are hundreds and hundreds of videos that Mary and I have both seen, and Whitley Strieber, who's a good friend of ours. We stay in touch about this, that are really unexplainable. They're incredible, because people are now really starting to pay attention to the sky as a result of all this activity. And we're getting videos of things that are clearly not drones, with nav lights on them, red and green, and anti-collision lights and landing lights. I mean, I'm an aviator, so I know my aircraft very, very well. And these things are clearly nothing that I can identify as being ours. So what do you think about this? And have you seen those other videos?
Well, a lot of the videos show airplanes to me. And
yeah, that's what I'm
it
saying.
seems like they ought to sort through and get the ones that don't show airplanes. And like I have flight radar on my iPhone, and I go out, and I've just been putting on Facebook a little bit. I see, a fair amount of, I'm close to the airports. There's military airports and regular airports.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a fair amount of aircraft going over that doesn't register on flight radar. And I just mentioned that not everything's on flight radar. Lots of things have their, their airplanes, but they have their transmitters turned off and all that. And so I just was kind of keeping track of that. But I don't know. A lot of the things they show on TV look like airplanes. So it looks like they go through and find the bad ones or something.
Well, on YouTube, there are plenty of private individuals who are going through those videos and separating them out from the ones that are clearly aircraft. And you're right, not all aircraft, especially military ones, are going to have their transponders on for various reasons, security, all kinds of things like that. But these videos, you look at them, your jaw drops. And now I don't know if you're aware that I've worked in visual effects in Hollywood all my life. I've been with computer animation since its conception, and we started doing that. And I've done every kind of effect you can think of. So when I look at some of these videos, there's something that just stands out right away to me when they're fake. And 90% of the videos that I've been looking at, these ones that aren't aircraft, they're not fake. These are everyday folks out and about, and look what's up there. Oh my God, what is that? And they get their phones out, and I can take the videos and I can analyze them and zoom in on them, and I can tell if they're fake that way, but I really don't have to, because you can really tell they're not, and they're amazing. I mean, they're just really amazing. And there's more of those than there are actually the aircraft that the media keeps showing us, but they're not featuring those videos, probably for obvious reasons.
I agree. I mean, I think they ought to put the better videos on.
Yeah, but they're not going to. There's a lot of people, I'm surprised, that are actually very frightened by some of the things they've been seeing. Because when you see this large orb in the sky and it starts belching more of them, and you get what you know to be called as a string of pearls starting to dance across the sky and then make formations and shapes and things, they're not quad drones, hobby drones or military drones or anything else. These are clearly something that has a lot of energy and a lot of light emanating from it, and it's producing other craft or other objects from it. And we've seen this all through the history of UFOs, going way, way back. I mean, I seeing film in my head of that very phenomenon going back before we ever had camcorders and video. And I know you know what I'm talking about. And it's been prolific lately, and it's happening in China. It's worldwide, but it's being kept off the air. So, which comes as no surprise. So, you haven't had a chance to see those? I would take a look. So,
yeah, people keep sending me videos, and a lot of them I think, oh, this is not a drone, but yeah. So. But some of them are. Yeah.
I also fly radio-controlled aircraft. I'm licensed. I'm tested. I'm registered with the FAA. And what I fly mainly is replicas of World War II and early era jets from the 50s. They're large models, but they could never be mistaken as a UFO. And again, when I see the videos, I know the difference even with the drones. I'm qualified to fly drones. I've just never had an interest in them.
Yeah, I have a drone, and I've been thinking about flying it and taking some sort of control pictures to say this is what a drone is, but the weather's so miserable, I'm afraid my drone will crash into the snowdrift someplace, so I haven't done it.
So you're in the snow, and we're out here in the fires and the wind.
Yeah.
Someone just
Oh,
mentioned
yeah.
someone just mentioned here in the comments that doesn't Whitley live in the Palisades? Well, no, he lives in Santa Monica. He's been evacuated twice.
Oh, murder.
And I think he's back home now. So, but the Palisades fire was coming right down into Santa Monica, so he had to get out.
Oh,
But he's fine, and
good.
we talk all the time. So what are you up to these days?
Well, I'm trying to write another book.
This one's amazing. This is just.
Well, I think we called it Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, but I think we have the evidence to, convince a court that we do have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm. She has a question. Oh, you have a question. Irena, what is your most outstanding UFO report that you've captured that captured your attention?
I think one way back in Ohio called the Ravinia one. It was with these policemen called Spar and Neff, and they heard about this UFO up in Michigan. They laughed about it and everything. And then this thing came over their police car and real low, and they were scared and they jumped in their police car. And they were on the radio with the police station the whole time. They covered into 2 states and were talking to the police station. The police station, do you have a camera? And they said no, but they followed it. And that was pretty interactive because sometimes it would kind of wait until they caught up with it and things like that. Well, have you heard of that one?
I know this case. Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
It's been covered in some documentaries, and I saw one where they actually did a really good job of recreating their situation and what they saw. It's quite striking.
Yeah, I just did a little bit of investigation, but not much. But I know the people that did a lot of investigation. It was just Spar's life was ruined because Project Blue Book told him it was Venus and he was a policeman, and that ruined his credibility and things. And that was terrible.
I mean, really, people, how? And first of all, the people accusing people of mistaking something for Venus can't even identify Venus. If I was to take them outside right now, when the sun goes down, I know where it is. They wouldn't, and there's a big difference between a very bright magnitude. It's almost first magnitude right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty bright.
Yeah, it's really bright, but still, it's just a bright star. When there's a big saucer-shaped thing hovering over you in your police car, and you've got a witness, no, that's not going to happen.
And there were a lot of other witnesses too. I mean, people saw this thing going across, and they were on the radio to the police station the whole time with other people calling in and things. I thought that was an extremely good one because it took a long time to do.
Yeah. So have you been able to listen to the ATC recordings from the pilots in Oregon recently?
I don't know. I don't remember.
I can send you a link to that. It is really striking. You have another question here.
How much of the Pascagoula community witnessed the craft?
Good question.
I think a lot of people did because when that happened, the person in the police station that was taking the calls said he got about 50 calls from people right then reporting something unusual. Plus, he said people came into the station and reported it. And then in our investigation, we're getting a lot of people also. Some of them are the same people, some of them reported, and a lot of people were with other people. And so I think there were a whole lot of, I mean, you couldn't estimate, but I think there were like 100 people or more that probably saw something odd.
Yeah, and some of them actually saw the craft over the water from a different vantage point. I know that that same YouTube channel host that I was talking about, basically in his conclusion said that how convenient that these people came forward later on after hearing about the case, and obviously just wanted to get attention. But the truth is, most of these people didn't want their names revealed, or did they? I mean, so
well, the police desk sergeant said that on that night he received like 50 calls or so about something unusual, and that was before anybody knew about the abduction or anything. I mean, that was unbiased, that people were seeing something odd then.
Oh, you had this question here.
Yeah, we had several experiences, my sister and I.
Wow, when was this?
It'd take a long time to explain. We started out when we were real.
That's fine.
We started out when we were real young kids before we'd ever heard of UFOs. It was years before we heard of UFOs. But we had a close encounter with something in our bedroom. And she was pretty sure she wasn't in school. And I don't know if I was in school. We were maybe 4 and 6 or younger. It was in the summertime and there was no storm or anything. My whole family remembered it. And they talked about it because we didn't know anything about UFOs at the time. So, there wasn't anybody shushing us up. But it was this thing that I woke up and this thing was flying around our room. And it wasn't blinking or anything. It didn't make any sound. And I wondered what on earth this thing was. And it flew kind of close to us. And I was a young kid, but I knew where the furniture was. It was night, and it didn't hit anything. I mean, if it came to a wall, it turned. If it went around furniture and stuff, but it came kind of close to us several times. And then it flew up to the ceiling, but it didn't hit the ceiling. It flew across the ceiling, and there was a chandelier in the middle of the room. Well, it flew over the chandelier, and it was an attic-type room with walls that came up, and the chandelier was the walls are about 3 feet apart. Well, the thing went to the chandelier and began to circle and circle and circle and circle, like it knew where the walls were and it knew where the chandelier was. And it circled and circled and circled. And then it came down the spiral, and both of us just became terrified and ran out of the room and fell down the stairs.
Sorry to laugh, but it's funny because, I've heard a lot of people talk about something just like this. And of course, I hope that Danny Dudas, he's a friend of ours, is listening to this, because he described something very, very similar when he was very, very young with his mom, where something came in. It was very small. It was like a saucer, and it flew around the room. And then I've heard it from other people as well. So, but
I had another witness. I mean, if it just happened to me, my parents told us that we were imagining things and things like that, but two of us saw it, and we weren't discussing it. I didn't even know she was awake, so we both, saw the same thing, even though our parents told us that we were nuts.
That's what they do. My mom knew differently, but she never shared that with me till a couple of years before she passed. Did it glow? Did it have a light?
It looked to me like it was small, and it looked like real hot iron. like
Huh.
glowing iron.
It wasn't dripping, I hope.
No, no.
You know about those cases, and we recently there was a lady in the UK who, with her cell phone, filmed one of these spheres, very hot, very brightly lit in the sky, and as it flew kind of towards them around the trees, you could see metal dripping from it, or hot molten something just dripping. When they went and found the metal too, and they're having it analyzed, I don't know what's become of that, but there have been other cases just like that. In fact, James Lowe, who you might know of,
The astronaut.
No, he's
Oh.
he's an attorney who's been writing. He's written 2 books preparing Congress for disclosure, but he's also had his own experiences, and he's been in one of our films where he talked about his experience, and I had to recreate that very thing. And it's in fact, I think it was in the combination video that I was showing at the beginning of this when we warmed up. You see it flying along and dripping. And he had that very same thing happen to him. He saw that. Let's see.
Earl Grey had a question.
Yeah, it keeps going down. There.
Oh.
There it is.
Okay. Yeah, we had, my sister and I had another encounter too. In this case, it was when we were older and we'd heard of UFOs. And at the time, I was working for the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, as a GS-11, which is a high position in photography. And with a clearance and everything, one of those top clearances, CSI and everything. And I was working in Washington, D.C., and my sister was at Drew University in New Jersey doing postgraduate work. And we were older. And this had nothing to do with UFOs, but we decided to go up. We were both on the East Coast, so we decided to go up and see the New England states. And so I took 2 coworkers and drove up to New Jersey, where she was, and took pictures of them. And we drove on up, and we were going to stay at Boston all night and then look at the New England states. Well, we got to Boston, it was early. So we drove on up to New Hampshire, and we actually were in some of the area, I think, where the hill thing was seen, but we didn't know anything about that. And I came back, and we couldn't find a motel in Boston, and so we were heading west of Boston. And there was an airport south of us called the Norwood Memorial Airport, and we could see airplanes coming in, with their landing lights and their wing lights of, green and red and everything blinking. And there was this other light, which seemed to be lower, and it was kind of following the road, the Route 95, which we were on then after that. And my sister keeps saying, "This is odd." And I was driving and not paying attention, and I kept saying, "Oh, it's a helicopter." And so we were driving along, and there was a woods on one side. And I saw this globe in the woods. It was made out of glass. It had a light in the middle that, as I remember, it seemed to go through a spectrum of red and blue and purple, and just kind of all the colors of red and purple and blue and everything. And there was something.
A refracting star.
Huh?
Like a refracting star, but way too big to be that.
Yeah, it was in the woods, and I couldn't tell if it wasn't moving. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And then the inside of our car lit up in green, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I looked around, I didn't see green anyplace else. And, I suppose I looked in the other cars to see if there was green. I didn't see green anyplace. And I thought this must have something to do with that thing I was seeing, but it wasn't green. And so the green went away in ways. And my sister and I kind of arguing about what we were seeing.
What year was that?
It was 68.
Mhm.
And so we were driving along, and my sister started screaming at me and telling me to pull over because the thing was going to go over the car. And I thought she was just went nuts. And I pulled over and I pointed my hand out. I was going to say, see, it's a helicopter doing that and all that. And anyway, then I saw this meteor way off, and right over the trees, this thing came over, and it was like a sort of submarine shaped with a red light, unblinking red light on one end, unblinking green light on the other, and 7 square windows along the side. And my sister said in a later write-up that she said that when we first saw it, that it shined a beam in the car. I didn't see that, but I was on the window. And so if the inside of the car lit up again, I wouldn't have noticed. Mm-hmm. So anyway, it started crossing the road, and it was blinking in a pattern of, I don't remember the exact pattern. It was like the first 3 windows were on and off, and then all 7, and then the last 4, something like that. And my sister kept saying something about, she thought it was a signal, and she seemed to think that this was some kind of a signal we should understand. But anyway, I was working in the DIA in photography, and you just disappeared.
Yeah, this happens from time to time, and we're not sure why.
Okay.
You can still hear me, though.
I hope I'm not boring you to death.
I know.
And anyway, then I was working
at... Not even remotely are you boring us.
Oh, okay.
I'm just checking the camera, so. I
was working in photography for the DIA, and I thought, oh, this would be a wonderful picture. I could prove UFOs exist because I could get a picture. I had a Polaroid camera in back seat, and high-speed film in my trunk. That was they didn't have iPhones or anything back then, but I could have got a time exposure. So anyway, I got all my equipment out and was putting the film in the camera and everything to get a picture. And a truck drove up in front of us and parked. And this man came, and I thought, oh, this would be nice because we'll have another witness. And he came and asked us what we were doing. And I didn't understand that at all because there was this thing up there. And so I pointed at it and said, what's this? And I didn't say UFO, I did like it was an airplane. But he turned around and pointed in just exactly the opposite direction and said, I don't see anything. And then I realized there was a problem here. And he turned it back around and asked the same question, real sincere, what are you doing? And I pointed at it again, and he looked in exactly the opposite direction and said, I don't see anything. Then he turned around, looked at me, and I don't remember the gesture, like pointing to his head or something, like he was telling me I was crazy. I didn't really see it. Well, I always wondered about that. It was really weird because we were by this UFO. And so anyway, just a couple of years ago, my sister found a write-up she made of that day and sent it to my mother, and she found the letter. And I asked her if she saw that man. She said no. Yeah. And so that was pretty creepy, but she did see the rest of it. So anyway, I tried to get a picture, and I climbed up a hill. I got a picture, and I actually published it in a scientific journal later. But I came back down, and we got in our car, and we were going to drive and see if we could figure out what it was. And so we took off, and we decided we'd turn around at an intersection and go back. In the meantime, it started circling in the airport, and it would circle like a half circle south and north and blink its lights on twice. And then it goes north to south so fast you couldn't even see it. And it kept circling like that. So we got on the road, And this truck driver got right behind us and got on my bumper, shined his bright lights in my mirror, and I couldn't see anything. I thought we were going to get killed. If I switched lanes, he switched lanes. And if I sped up, and finally I decided to really speed up and get off the road real fast from left-hand lane. And I did. And I got rid of him, but it was a real dangerous thing to do because somebody's coming up the other side, we'd have got killed.
Wow.
So we followed it back, and it was still circling the airport. And then it took off to the northwest, and we had the zigzag roads. And I finally wound up in this really miserable road, and I couldn't follow it any farther. So we went back to Drew and called her parents and told her and the roommates about it. And I found a letter later that my mother wrote to somebody about the same thing. And then I waited a long time for the coworkers, and they never appeared. And I had no idea why. They were mad at me the next day, said something happened. But anyway, I got back, and I had a poltergeist experience. And so anyway,
wow,
I was
full of surprises.
but I had this, I had this real, professional job, and like that. It was just like a military job or something. And my sister was well educated, and so it happened to us. But we didn't understand it.
Wow. So is this, you must have put this in one of your books, I would imagine.
Yeah, I put it in one of my books, both experiences, and I had another one, several other ones too. But I always had other witnesses. I was very lucky. And
yeah, I've had that on rare occasion, and it's helpful.
Yeah, it sure is.
Sometimes, more than once, I've had a really close-up and personal experience with a craft, or in this one case, it was this big sphere that I've told this story before, but you've probably never heard it. And I'll make it short. It was in Fraser Park. We were doing astrophotography with C8 celestrons. I'm sure you know what those are. Celestrons. And back in those days, you had to use an off-axis guider, and you have to look through the guider, and the camera's plugged into the scope, and you're doing a time exposure. I was doing the Ring Nebula, and all of a sudden, my friend's next to me, and all of a sudden there's a bright light shining in the corner of my eye, and I got irritated by it because I don't know why my friend would do that. He knows all too well you don't do that when you're doing time exposures. And I look over, and instead he's standing motionless, staring at this large sphere. It wasn't real bright. It was kind of an amber color, but I mean, it was big. And that's when I noticed there was no sound at all. None. Zip, zero, nothing. The wind, little breeze that was there was gone. The dogs barking in the distance were gone. The crickets stopped. Very typical. And of course, I ran over to it, and he was very frightened by my doing that. Said, "Don't do that. You don't know what that thing could do to you." And to make a long story short, after when I ran over to it, it took off, and I tried to follow it. I got to the edge of a cliff, and I watched it descend into the valley, into the volumetrics down there, the fog, and I could see it moving through it. It disappeared. So we come home the next day, and he's telling my late wife all about this. 2 weeks later, it gets brought up again. He has no memory of it. None. I mean, and I believed him. And then he started calling me some weeks later saying he's having terrible nightmares about this.
That's what he deserves.
Bright light coming in his window in Sausalito and shining all around inside of there. And they were nightmares, and he didn't know what could have caused them. So you're lucky that your witnesses remembered.
Oh, I was so lucky, because that happens to a lot of people. Lots of people say, well, they saw this with this other person, especially sometimes their siblings. And then their siblings doesn't remember a thing about it. And my sister, when our parents said, it's your imagination, or Irena's telling lies and things. Well, my sister stood up for herself, and I was very happy about that. And then once I had a sighting at Ohio State University. It was near the guide slope of the the Columbus airport. And I got witnesses, such as professors and things, and I asked them to write it down, and I got, write-ups on it about the thing. So I was just really lucky, but a lot of people say they're with somebody and the other person doesn't remember a thing about it.
And generally, those are the ones that are very close up and personal, I find.
Yeah, and you wonder how many people, have their memory deleted. If one remembers and one forgets, well, there's probably lots of times when both of them forget, or one person is by themselves and forget.
The look on my wife's face was amazing when she brought it up to him again, and he says, "I don't remember anything about that. What are you talking about?" And she just looked at me, and because she was very frightened by this whole thing, and skeptical, very skeptical, and really wanted me out of it. She wasn't really pleased with Whitley coming over all the time and stuff. She was very unnerved by all of it. The irony of it is that she got me communion when it first came out because she knew I had an interest in UFOs. But of course,
I met Whitley several times and I've done several podcasts with him. He's pretty neat.
Oh yeah. We've been very close friends for a very, very, very long time. And in fact, we've actually the stuff's happened while we've been together. So, which, more than, not that I ever doubted it really backs him up, so yeah. Okay. We still have some time left. This is a great time to ask questions. If you have them. Why do you think let's see. Okay, that's a good one. And Judy is a lifelong experiencer. We just recently did a show on her, and it's already got 32,000 views, which is astounding.
Wow.
We tend to be very straightforward. I don't know if you've watched any of our episodes, but we allow someone to come in front of a camera and tell their story. They're not directed. They're not interviewed. And then I edit it. But I don't edit anything out. It's just accept the gaps. And then I, using my abilities with art and special effects, try to recreate what they experienced as best I can. And it's been very successful. And her episode really successful recently, so because she's very credible. So she wants to know why what you think is behind two people seeing something and one doesn't see it.
Well, I didn't realize that it happened to me until 2 years ago when I asked my sister, "Did you see this man?" She saw him chase us in the truck and things like that, but she didn't see me talking to him. And she wrote up a thing and said that that I was loading my camera. It seemed to take me a real long time to load the camera, and she said at that time the thing seemed to get in another place. Well, I didn't pay attention to that at first, and then finally when she found her letter that she wrote to her mother, I asked her, and she didn't remember talking to him at all, but she did remember the rest of it. So I was happy about that. So I don't know. I thought that I thought this was a real man, and then maybe I thought afterwards I found out from her that maybe it was some kind of a projection. Maybe they projected, him into my mind, or maybe they deleted it from her mind. But we did see the rest of the things.
Wow. Go ahead.
So we kind of had a gap where we saw everything to start with and everything to end with, but there was a little place in there where we had that little problem of not seeing the same thing. But so that was good. But in a lot of cases, people say that they had this or that to happen to them with somebody else, and the other person says, "Oh no, it didn't happen." And that's what's really annoying, especially for the people that see it, because their other witness says, "Oh no, you're crazy." And but like Kathleen Martin does a lot of work with people that have missing time, and Bud Hopkins and all that.
Sure.
And that may be why a lot of people they seem to give them like the experience, but sometimes delete the memory of other people.
Sure. It seems as though our visitors are very selective who they want to remember things and who they don't want to remember things. So, which, if you think about it, has a lot to say. You got another question?
Yeah. Did you have lost time when you analyzed your drive incident afterwards? Bud Hopkins interviewed both of us. And at the time he interviewed me, he asked me for a timetable. And I wrote up every detail that I could remember right after it happened the next day. But for some reason, I didn't put the times down, which is stupid. I didn't have my watch with me, for one thing. And so I thought this was all lost. But then my sister found the letter that she wrote to my mother, and she had the times down. And so anyway, if I had it, if Bud was still alive and I could write back to him, I could make a timetable now. And I think we had missing time because I think we started about maybe 10 or 10:30 when we first saw the thing. But we were in Boston, but it only takes about 3 hours to go from Boston to New York. And we arrived at New York at about 6 o'clock in the morning. So I think there was some missing time.
Yeah. It sure sounds like it. You have another question.
What is the most interesting? The most interesting, compelling aspect to me is that, especially with these abduction type things, that there's a lot more to it than the abduction. I mean, everybody pays attention to, well, you're taken into this ship and they, do these experiments on you and everything. And a lot of times there's all these other things, such as with the Pascagoula, such as these things came out and they levitated them into the object. And there'll be people levitate, these objects levitate, and all kinds of things like that. People say, the time stands still. Like it's just you're in a movie and suddenly it stops and you're abducted and then you come back down. And there's all kinds of just strange things like that happen that, besides the abduction. So I think there's like something that makes all the laws of physics go crazy during that time.
Well, as I described to you, the deafening silence. And my first experience ever was when I was 6 years old. That was in 1958 in San Francisco on the avenues. And I woke up to a vacuum. I mean, I doubted if I could even breathe. It was so quiet. It's like time is standing still. You have another question.
Do you ever have things that are so bizarre you can't tell anyone? No, I tell people.
Cat's out of the bag.
Because I've been lucky in that I've had other people with me. I mean, if it happened, like if I saw an alien walking across my living room or something, and though it was here and I couldn't take a picture, I might be very quiet. But I've been lucky so far that I've been with people that mostly remember the same thing I do. I mean, if I have an experience, I hope I have other witnesses. So,
yeah, unfortunately, the night I went into my kitchen at 3 a.m. to get some water from the refrigerator, I did not have a witness, but standing right there looking at me was a gray type being, sort of tan colored, and it looked at me. It didn't act surprised that I saw it, and it just suddenly just turned and just blurred out of existence right through the refrigerator. So, but I was wide awake, and I'm very sure that what I saw was there. That's not to say that what I saw was actually what I saw, but there was definitely something there. Thus the title of my film, but something is there. So,
well, some of these debunkers say, "Oh, you went to the refrigerator and you were drinking and you saw it," which, I'm just saying that the debunkers say
water,
that.
water's a powerful drug. Well, what was standing there actually at first was one of those heavy duty cutting boards, a butcher block board, real thick wood and on legs. And I looked at it and I thought, why did she leave that there? I'm thinking of my late wife, Jilly. And the legs started to move and it sort of broke whatever I was looking at. And then it was the being. So, and I know you've heard this before too. So that people will see something else and then they realize there's more going on.
Yeah, the rabbit thing. I was just looking at that one that you did.
Oh, you watched that one? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't care how much tequila you drink. You're not going to see rabbits in the middle of the road turn into gray aliens. It's never going to happen. Wow. But you're right. There is a lot more going on, and it is interesting, the other things that happen, especially with a total disregard to our knowledge and belief in our current physics. That was a question. Where'd it go?
No, it wasn't. It's a statement.
Oh, it was a statement. Okay.
Yeah.
When you have mass amounts of people describing the same beings and these folks are continent, that's right. And like, that's why I was hoping that our book is influential with its evidence to show that close encounters are real, because like the government, they're saying, well, if something's, miles and miles distant and an airplane pilot sees it, or somebody gets it on radar miles distance, then they might consider just a little bit that exists. But if somebody sees something like you said, standing in front of the refrigerator, will they say, oh no, this can't possibly happen? Well, it happens to lots of people that are perfectly sane, intelligent people that aren't drunk or on drugs.
Whitley's communion letters, the book, The Communion Letters, is full of them. And what people have to remember, who are so almost violently skeptical, is that these letters were sent to Whitley and Anne. They wanted to remain anonymous. These letters were sent to them. It would have had to have been around 1987, 1988. We did not have the internet. They came from all over the world, and there was no way for these people to conspire in the thousands to share these similar instances. And what was really amazing too is there were drawings that were accompanied with those letters, which I finally got a quick glimpse of. And they're remarkable because I've been drawing the beings forever, and they were drawing them before I was, and exactly the same thing. And all these letters and the drawings are at Rice University.
Great.
Yeah. But how did they make that up? How did they share that? And Whitley's book really was kind of the first of its kind, because he had that visitor on the cover, and that just set off everybody's alarm bells who had an experience or thought they had an experience or thought they had a dream. How could they know what I dreamed about? Why is that on that book? It was really a world-changing book.
Well, I remember when I was a real young kid, my grandfather was a preacher, and he had a whole stack of letters, and once I started reading them, and it was before I'd had the experience of the thing in our room and things, but I didn't know that was a UFO at the time. But I started reading them, and they would talk about these experiences, seeing light and things. And unfortunately, I don't know what happened to the letters and things, but they were kind of like that too, except they were talking about religious experiences, but it was kind of like the same thing, but then they thought this was a religious experience. I wish I could find those letters, but I can't. Been lost for years.
Well, Whitley was a real troublemaker. He really stirred it up. As Judy said, he woke everybody up, and he really did, because up to that point, for myself personally, I had been watching and paying attention to UFOs ever since I was 6 years old, or maybe even earlier. I always had my eye to the sky. I'm always looking at the stars. and was fascinated by the whole subject matter. And then I was seeing them quite regularly, and some far away, some right up close, and I didn't make the connection until I read his book, and then it kind of dawned on me. It was this aha moment. I got this chill all over my body, and then my poor late wife probably thought it was the worst thing she ever did was to bring that book home.
But it educated you.
Yeah, it did. So obviously you read the book at one point. Did it set off any triggers in you?
No, because like I have wildlife cameras all over my yard and things, and some weird things happen with them. But like with owls, he saw an owl. Well, like I see an owl all the time because an owl flies down and lands, and I know it's a real owl. But like I had, like once I was driving through a blizzard in New York, and the freeway was icy, and I couldn't stop, and turned a corner, and there was a huge owl sitting there right in the middle of a storm on a fence post. But I didn't have a camera with me, and so I just ignored it. You wonder, but I think it was a real owl, though.
Yeah, I where I lived in that house where I had that first encounter, it was 47th Avenue, San Francisco. I could see Playland from my window. Golden Gate Park wasn't too far away. I wasn't really up on whether or not great horned owls were prominent in that area, but I had one sitting in my window, looking at me, staring in at me.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the things you've seen on your? What are some of the things you've seen on your cameras?
Well, I had one thing happen recently that I wrote 2 papers about it. I wrote in Outer Limits magazine and in a
Outer Limits magazine. Cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of wildlife, and also in the fall, a lot of deers get killed on the road. And sometimes, just to get more wildlife in my camera, I will contact the highway patrol, and they will come out and mark the deer. And then I take it home and throw it out in the yard and photograph, because there's a lot of interesting animals that come around, including the owls and everything. And usually it takes the biggest predators. This just happens in the winter, not when they're all smelling and oozy in the summer. I've just put them out in the winter. But anyway, usually the biggest predators are coy wolves. They're sort of a mixture of coyotes and wolves that live in this area, live in the east. Actually, they're usually called eastern coyotes or things. And they're a combination. They're bigger than coyotes, but smaller than wolves and all that. Well, they come, and there's a lot of other, the owls and the hawks and the skunks and the opossums and everything else, but they're the biggest. And it normally would take them about several weeks to finish a carcass. And so anyway, I had a carcass out, and it was an intact deer. And one night, one morning I woke up and it was gone. And here it was like about 200 feet away and eaten right down to the bones. And I had a picture of an opossum beside it at 2:00 in the morning. And I found it at about 7 o'clock. So something drug it away and ate it that fast. And so I just did, you can do science on that. So I put out more deers and took what I had and studied how long it took a coy wolf to eat a deer. And I've added some recently this year too, because I've photographed 3 coy wolves together several times, and sometimes 4, which is sort of a pack. Well, it takes them weeks to eat a deer. And so I couldn't figure out what happened, and I wrote it up, and just did a scientific experiment, but I'm still studying this subject. And it was pretty funny though, because I didn't really know what did it because it wasn't the general pattern of the way the coy wolves eat things.
Wow. I'll be darned. That's amazing. So if you have any sightings yourself lately?
No, it's been a number of years ago. And the last one I had was here. I didn't have another witness, so it wasn't nearly as good as my ones with another witness. But actually, there had been a real good sighting a number of years ago in Ohio that another person I had gone to investigate. This was sort of like a spar thing. It was these people that they were out on a farm, and they saw these flashing lights up in the sky above them, but it didn't go away. It stayed, and they called the police, and the police came out and saw it, and they didn't know what it was. And they put it on the TV and called Wright Patterson and called all kinds of things, and it was thoroughly investigated with people looking at it. Nobody could figure out what was going on. And so anyway, they reported it, and another person I went out later, a week or so later, and questioned them. And then we came back, and it turned out that after we left, that they had a sighting of the same thing again. There was an airplane that seemed to be flying by on a grid when they saw it, and one of them came down and followed a car and all kinds of things. So it was a very interesting, it was like the spar thing. It took a long time. They reported it. The authorities looked at it and didn't see it, figure out what it was and all that. So anyway, I didn't realize it at the time, but to the day, a certain number of years later, I saw this thing out in my yard, and I was actually outside taking pictures of the planets because Saturn and I think Mercury, which is hard to see, and other things were out at the same time, and the moon and Venus. I think there were several planets out, and I was taking pictures of them. Well, this thing came, two of them, two red balls came, and they seemed to be close. And I had my camera in my hands taking pictures of the planets, and this thing came by, and I was so dumbfounded I didn't take a picture of it.
Oh,
so it was
God.
like two things that were exactly
The
right on
skeptics
top
love
of it.
that.
I know, that was so irritating.
They just
So-
love that. Oh, yeah, sure.
I know. I was standing there with the camera right in my hands there, and I was so amazed that I didn't take a picture. So then suddenly I had two cameras set up, and I had a camcorder to take videos. This was several years ago before the iPhones took videos.
Right.
And so anyway, suddenly right afterwards, the whole sky lit up with all kinds of lights. It was like the dancing lights of this thing, and it was exactly as so many years later. And so I did get a video of the lights flashing on and off, and I still have that, but I didn't have any other.
Wow.
But I reported it several places and put the video on.
Wow.
But anyway, what were you going to say? Weird marks are possible. Well, I had several years ago, I woke up and my leg was purple. And it was real sore. It was like somebody beating me with a ball bat or something. I had no idea why. And so anyway, I had trouble walking. I could hardly get out of my car or sit or anything else. And so I went into the doctor, and the doctor I put pictures of this on Facebook. The doctor my knee swelled up to about twice its size, and the doctor pulled a big syringe full of blood out of it and things like that. And then they did an MRI on it. I could still be in physical therapy, but I decided to quit because I still have a limp from it. I don't know what happened, but they found in my other leg, they reported there was something there. I didn't pay attention to it, and I still didn't, but they said something was there in my leg. So I don't know, I was, health insurance was paying for it, and I didn't want to cause a big deal, so I didn't say anything too much. But that's written up in my the thing that came from the hospital. So they actually have x-ray pictures and the whole deal of it. But I never,
You never looked at them?
no, paid too much attention. But there was something there that they remarked about and said. But it was a really bad injury because tendons and ligaments and everything else were pulled out. But I have no idea what happened.
You don't know how you got it.
No.
Yeah,
I was
well,
normal that night and woke up the next day with severe football type injury.
Wow. Well, Roger Lear had my arm x-rayed back in the 90s looking for something. And the person that took the x-ray came out because Roger had to leave and asked me how I had my arm broken. And he showed me the x-ray, and it was a perfect, like 45-degree angle razor cut through both bones.
Wow.
And he says, that must have hurt really bad. How did you break your arm like that? And I didn't know what he was talking about because I've never had a broken bone and ever. He actually got kind of indignant with me and accused me of lying. He said, I know a broken bone when I see it. This is my job. And I said, I'm telling you, I have never broken a bone. I've never broke my arm. And so they get real interested in these things, and I mean, he knew that we were in there to take a photograph, x-ray, look for a possible implantation of some sort, but they found that instead. I wish I had that x-ray still because it was quite remarkable.
Why didn't they? They sent me the MRIs and I couldn't find it. I intended to write the doctor and ask, but they definitely wrote it out, and I put that on Facebook, and it's still on their communication. It's called My Chart, and they report everything that happens to you. And they reported, something was in my leg. But
Wow. Well, this has been a remarkable hour. I'm glad sure I haven't found out everything about you, but I found out a lot of stuff I didn't know about. And, an hour is hardly long enough to cover all the incredible work that you've done. So if you don't mind, we'd like to have you back at another time. And
thank you. Yes, I'd love to be back.
Yeah, and I really appreciate Earl for hooking us up. That was very sweet of him. And he's hooked us up with a lot of amazing people, which you are one of.
Well, he's one of them too, and so are you.
Oh, thank you. People can find your books where?
Amazon.com. I have a website, irenascott.com, and I have my books, and they can just click on them, and it goes to Amazon.
Right. Okay.
So they just look up.
I should have got that link from you. Please accept my apologies. I should have had that link and had it up for people to see. But the people here are very, very sharp, and I'm sure they'll go look it up quite quickly.
This is the next. Oh, let me see. That's not it.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Quick on the draw.
Thanks.
When I'm not.
The
next book is what?
Well, let me see. Where is it? I don't have my latest. Well, this one, but you already showed it. That one with.
Oh yeah. No, I'm very pleased to have that. I really appreciate Philip sending me this. It could also be used as a defense weapon. It's so big and heavy.
Well, he likes to put lots of pictures in too, which really makes them a lot better. Because
lots of documents too in here. And
yeah.
I mean, if he could have put the recording in there somehow that was taken while the police had left the interrogation room, that he would have had that in there too. And I think that was a really compelling.
That's what convinced people.
Yeah. They didn't know they were being recorded.
No, and the police didn't want to be made full of either, so they put that recording in there, and they were expecting the people to laugh and say, "Oh, we put it over on them." Well, they were terrified. I mean, you could tell from their voices, besides what they said, that they were just out of their minds in terror.
Yeah, it's understandable. But in closing here, um, I'd like to ask you what you think about that. Do you, I don't personally feel that we're under a threat. If we were, it would be over with a long time ago. And I do understand human nature and why they're afraid of things they that are unknown. But how do you feel about all that?
I just don't know. I mean, I'm in science and you should feel neutral. And so I try to feel neutral, although it's kind of terrifying, but I just don't know. I mean, I don't think there's enough information, but I think what worries me is the government shouldn't be ignoring this. I mean, it's ridiculous because lots of people have experiences, vast
And
numbers.
they're aware of that. Trust me, they're very well aware of that, and I think they're afraid themselves
Yeah, it could be
because
that
this is
something
much
terrible will
bigger.
happen.
Yeah, this is much bigger than I think they were aware of initially. And when Whitley's book came out, '87, it brought a lot of people to the surface, far more than I think was anticipated. And they're still coming forward. And because of our show, Breaking the Silence, more and more people have the experiences. They're being very brave to come forward, sit in front of camera, and tell their story. And I
Yeah,
think
in a
that's
way that, because it takes bravery to do that, because
yeah,
everybody's going to say you're crazy. And
yeah,
so there's probably a lot less hoaxes because people make fun of people that say those things.
that's true. And they still are, and they still will, regardless of what happens. It would seem. Mary, of course, has been doing the Secret Stories podcast, which is basically she reads letters that are sent to us for people who have nothing to gain by sharing their story because they don't want to be identified. They want their identity to remain secret, but they want to get it off their chest because it happened to them. And like Whitley's and Ann's book, The Communion Letters, I would ask the skeptics and the debunkers, what do you have to say about people coming forward to tell these stories? They have nothing to gain by doing it. And in fact, the ones who do reveal their identities often suffer from
Yeah.
the ridicule, and yet they still come forward. Now, you got to listen to me. This really happened. I did that during the '90s by appearing on numerous television shows with Whitley and Yvonne Smith and Roger Lear. Yeah, and it was very hard on my friendships with people, family, and my career, but I did it anyway. So,
Well, I just think I'm very lucky that my other witness
yeah, there you
admitted
go.
it.
Well, we really appreciate you using science to. I really liked your answer about whether should we be afraid or not, and you kept it to the scientific methodology, having the data to indicate one way or the other. In my personal experience with it all, whoever I'm dealing with, I don't feel threatened by them, and I don't think they're a threat to humanity. But that doesn't speak for the other possible intelligences that may be here.
Yeah, and they can control your thoughts, and that's a really bad thing because
Yeah,
you may not know.
you can bet our government would love to get their hands on that technology.
Yeah.
Irena, it's been a pleasure having you here tonight, and we look forward to having you back. And everybody here very much enjoyed you being here. We really appreciate all the hard work you've done over the years and are continuing to do. You're one of those bright lights shining in all
Well,
of
thank
this.
you very much.
You're very welcome.
You certainly are, both of you.
All righty. Well, thank you guys for all the support and being here tonight. And thank you, Irena, again. And we're going to sign off.
Well, thank you.
All right.